What's up, guys? I'm on my way to work right now. Now I was thinking about language in terms of the way that we speak. This is for my Christian audience, because there's a lot of debate on whether cussing is a sin, and which I don't really think the Bible attempts to claim such a thing. But one thing that I do notice about Paul's position on the conduct of our speech, the one thing that you have to do when you're trying to figure out something as systematic as that is you have to break down the topic and find all the areas in which it's discussed. Because sometimes people, this is a classic novice biblical interpretational mistake. Whatever. I'm using way too many fucking words. Interpretation mistake is that you take single areas in the Bible and you separate it from the more holistic teaching about something. So when we talk about cussing, we're taking out one specific aspect of language and applying a whole application to it, such as cussing is a sin. Now, my claim is not that because I like to cuss, that therefore it's not a sin. That's not true. Do I think I should cuss as much as I do? No. I don't believe that. I think I should probably guard my mouth far more than I do. But if you take the New Testament and you break it down, what you see about language, especially even in James 3, I believe, has very serious analogies and metaphors of the power of the tongue. And Paul kind of litters through the smaller epistles like Colossians and Ephesians about the way that we should conduct our speech. And one thing that I've gathered about that is what Paul is saying is that collectively our speech needs to be gracious and seasoned with salt, which means the overarching way that we should carry the way that we speak shouldn't be malicious. It shouldn't be slanderous. It shouldn't be unfit for as to build up. It is a collective way of speaking, general way of speaking. It's not a specific way. It's general. We need to encourage one another. It's and the reason why I know that cussing in particular isn't a sin is because even in that that passage, he says, but only language that is good as building up. Now there's so much type of language and rhetoric that is not aimed at the end of encouraging. That is simply language in and of itself. It's not wrong, it's not sinful, it's just different type of language. Now, if you're cussing out someone, you're directing your anger through destructive language towards another person. That would be wrong. That would be sin. Because the heart behind it. But cussing in and of itself is arbitrary and subjective and doesn't have any actual meaning to it. If you stub your toe on a door and you say damn, like, as long as you're not directing it towards someone and with malicious intent, I don't think that's sinful. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not saying that I'm right. It's just from what I've gathered about the New Testament in regards to language and how they talk about there needs to be intentionality behind how we speak wisdom, knowing that when we say certain things, it's not reflecting what God has done in our hearts. So you could make a claim. Now, is it unwise So the way that I separate categories of sin or behavioral issues and how you classify them is, one, there seems to be throughout the whole Bible a camp of what is sinful and what is unwise. Proverbs has a lot of things to say about what's unwise and what's wise. And it seems as though what's unwise is not necessarily sin, it's just not fruitful. It's not producing necessary fruits for sanctification. It's not what you should be participating in necessarily, but it isn't a sin. But some people will interpret that and be like, well, I can do it. It's like, no, just because you're not bound by it doesn't mean that you should participate in its actions. It's not a sin to be a drug abuser and just take a lot of drugs, but is it wise? No, it's stupid. It's folly. You shouldn't do that because you're deteriorating your body. Like, that's just common sense. So there are certain things, again, in the Bible that aren't meant to be taken. There's a greater truth to them than simply black and white. This is sin, this is not sin. Now, there are things in the Bible that are black and white. This is sin, this is not sin. But some of the other things are trying to create a whole man, trying to create a new person. And it's not the specifics that create this new man, as Colossians talks about, that we're built up into the man Jesus Christ, obviously, but the new man being the spiritual man, the man that renders himself to the spirit and not the flesh. There's a collective way of behavior that is true of the spiritual man, and the spiritual man considers all things, weighs all things as wise, takes, thinks about those things deeply and not necessarily acting on everything that's, whatever. So it is intentional with his language, knows how to make the best use of his time, isn't a slave to anger, not allowing Satan to have a foothold in his life. So, yeah, but that's all I have today. So, peace.